welcome to the next installment of the Bhumi and Tom webcast. Today we are addressing the problem of childhood obesity, and I would love to hear what Dr. Tom and Dr. Bhumi have to say. We've got a few very interesting questions over here. I hope we're going to get through all of them. So I am Shifi Silverstone from Dr. Pedia, and I would like to start with the first question. How prevalent is the problem of childhood obesity? And any of you can go.
Sure. I'll go first, and then
Thank you.
First, let's define, I guess, obesity. I think that would be the best thing to do.
Yeah.
So what we as pediatricians do is every time a child comes in, we did get their height, their weight, blood pressure, so forth. And what we use standard is BMI, which is body mass index. And body mass index is basically calculated weight divided by your height squared. So you're basically getting a ratio. And above 2 years old, you get to start, plotting it and determining their BMI. And so when you're discussing that, those who have a BMI of 85 percentile or less are considered within a normal weight range. Those between 85 and 95 percentile, of course, now that's overweight category. And then above the 95th percentile is obesity. And then you can also get into severe obesity and so forth. So once you get that categorized, then you could say, okay, well, what's the prevalence? Unfortunately, in the United States, we are seeing about a third of our children in the category of overweight and obesity, and nearly 5% in severe obesity, unfortunately. So we're starting to look at this, and I know we'll go on and talk about the trends and so forth.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Tom.
I think an important point is that using the term obesity is kind of part of medical lingo, but probably not one that I or Bhumi will use in the office when we're talking to families. So, and to try and use the term more, your child's at a healthy weight or not so healthy weight. So certainly when we're talking about research articles, it's important to have a strict definition so doctors are speaking to each other in the same language. So the language of obesity, as Bhumi said, is defined as greater than 95 percentile for your BMI for your age. So when children are growing, there isn't a set BMI that causes you to be put into a certain weight classification like there is in adults. So for children, we're looking at their growth over time, as well as their BMI number will change over time. So it's really the percentile of BMI that allows us to categorize whether they're at a healthy weight or not.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, I think that I think we're very, very clear that the I guess the issue of childhood obesity is quite big, and it's growing, and I guess that leads me on to the second question is that has the prevalence changed over time? And I'm sure the answer is yes, but I was if you give me a bit more to the answer, just yes, of the background and how it's developed, and we're going to look into it a bit deeper.
Sure. Yeah. So there's not a lot of significantly large volume studies published post-COVID. So at least the last CDC data looks at incidence of obesity for the most part through 2020. And at that point, the level of obesity was considered in terms of the greater than 95th percentile for BMI, close to 20%. If you look compared to the decades previously, there has been an upward trend over time. There have been probably in the past decade a little bit of leveling off in that increase, but many people presume, and there has been some soft evidence so far published, that COVID has kind of stopped that stalling of the trajectory. So when studies and data are published over the next 5 or so years, I think most people who specialize in the field fully expect that post-COVID, the incidence of obesity is going to have increased even more so than it had in the past decade.
Wow. Thank you.
And so along with exactly what Tom said, that there were some studies that showed around 2017, 2018 that we were plateauing, and that was all good news. And then, of course, with the pandemic hitting, unfortunately, and even I'm sure Tom has seen it in his office. When I saw children from 2020 to 2021, I saw those BMIs going up pretty significantly. And this is just a small office, but we're all seeing it.
Wow. Wow. So it's every, as you say, every pediatrician is seeing it in their own little tiny office. Then the issue is quite big. Um, I'm just interested in your experience, and obviously, you seeing different type of people. I'm assuming you work in different communities. That could be interesting as well to ask. But is the issue more prevalent in some communities than others?
Yes, it is. When you're looking at the general population and the communities, and again, based in the United States, of course, where we do see a higher prevalence in Native American population. We actually see a higher prevalence in the Black community and Mexican Americans. We also see it when you're looking at lower education, lower socioeconomic. And when you're looking at that, there definitely are going to be some genetic factors, but a lot of it is environmental factors that go hand in hand with those communities.
Wow. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just expand on what type of, if you can share with us, what type of community do you work in, or you see more patients in?
I actually see middle class population, and when we're seeing in our population here, you see that the parents who do have access to resources, who do have access to economically paying for the healthier foods and so forth. So yes, I actually have a lower population of obesity and so forth. But again, you see that discrepancy because of the resources.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Tom.
Yeah, I guess it's important to point out that the experience of a single pediatrician in a small community isn't necessarily going to be a true reflection of the larger population as a whole.
Sure.
So my individual practice, I practice in a suburban community where the majority of my patients ethnically are white Caucasian and middle to upper middle class environment. So I've never actually sat down and calculated the percentage of obesity in my patients in my individual practice, but I would say just roughly it probably does mirror the general population statistics that are published. And as Bhumi said, we're going to get into in a little bit what are all the factors that can contribute to children having a harder time maintaining a healthy weight. But certainly some of it is access to resources. So whether those are, living in a food desert or not living in a food desert, having the means to be able to purchase foods that will allow one to more easily maintain a healthier lifestyle.
Sure.
There are safety factors in many communities that prevents the ability for children to have the opportunity to just have free play in an open environment. So there are many factors that come back to where you do live and socioeconomic status that can ultimately lead to an impact on obesity rates.
Right. Great. And I think that leads us literally straight into the next question, which is, what do you think are the root causes for childhood obesity? And I think there's a lot, but I guess, what are your,
So as I think of it, as I try and speak to families about it, basically when your child's weight is not in a healthy place, it means that there's a mismatch of calories coming in and calories that are being used up. And very simplistically, that's a very easy way to think of it. So what does that mean? So even before we get into the environmental and lifestyle factors, there obviously is the question of genetics.
Sure.
So for sure, it's not really clearly identified what percentage risk genetics plays. There's not a single gene that controls obesity, but it's quite clear that even outside of considering for environmental factors within families, families do have a predisposition to having a harder time maintaining a healthy weight. So although we don't fully understand the genetics of obesity, there clearly is a component to that.
Sure.
However, people who have that genetic susceptibility just have to work extra hard in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And the factors basically come down to the quality and number of calories consumed and one's ability to be able to burn off calories through exercise and other parts of your daily routine. So within each category, there's obviously many different components in terms of things that we consider to be healthier choices versus not, that I'll let Bhumi get into.
Right. And I think, I guess I'm coming back to you just because, I'd like to hear from you what, like, more specific causes that you would say, yes, in general, it's obviously somebody who takes in more calories than actually, works out or is able to lose. But what would you say is kind of a more practical kind of cause for child obesity? I'm just challenging you there a bit more.
Dr. Tom was talking about, yes, there's that mathematically, yes, we know that there's the imbalance. But when we're looking at it, I kind of like to look at it as maybe not a root cause, but more risk factors that are involved in why we're seeing, more and more prevalence. And, how are we getting to this imbalance? And I think it's, again, environmental factors. When we're looking at environmental factors, we're looking at, our lifestyles are a lot more sedentary. We're seeing, we're not walking as much to go places. Unless you're in New York City, people are driving. People are not taking their bicycles outside as much. The video games have taken over, for recreational times for our children. So when you're looking at that, we're going more towards a sedentary lifestyle, but also the availability of the foods that are in our environment. The sugary drinks have really just eliminated just the healthy water intake that we should be doing. And the sugary drinks come in the form of, hey, it's really electrolytes, but it still has a lot of sugar in it. So we're seeing, increased sugary drinks, even morning routines. We're seeing more and more children skipping breakfast. Well, that's a root cause of seeing that health imbalance. So that, and then sleep. Sleep, even though we don't talk about it much, sleep is a very, very important contribution to weight management. And as we're seeing a lot of poor sleep hygiene, whether it's quality or quantity or both. So when you're looking at that, I think all of those factors put together really cause that imbalance in caloric intake and output.
Yeah.
Going back to your question a few minutes ago, so, has the rate of obesity changed over time? The answer is yes. So the follow-up question is, well, why? So what has changed over the past decade or two? And there's clearly a lot of research into that topic. And, I think that there's a couple of, for sure, things that you can point to. And for sure, if you look at the increase in screen time usage in children, I think most experts point to that as, clearly epidemiologically a link between the onset of increased obesity and when screen time became much more prevalent. If you look at the American diet as it has evolved over the course of a decade or two, the use of much more processed foods, the prevalence of fast food consumption. If you look at the busy American lifestyle of children who are overscheduled, and both parents working, and the lack of time and opportunity to prepare a healthy dinner at home through nobody's fault, honestly.
Sure.
It is the reality of life, resorting to consumption of fast food, which obviously has both too many calories as well as the wrong kind of calories, is clearly a link as well. And then going back to a point I previously made about safety concerns, there certainly are increasing concerns in almost all communities across the United States, some in more than others, in terms of children having safe environments to be able to exercise and to play. So if you look at increasing crime rates over the course of, a decade or two, it certainly understandably makes parents pause when they tell their child to just go outside and play. Sometimes that may not be the best thing for their long-term health for other reasons.
Yeah.
So I think those are three very specific things that have changed. So the question is, well, so then what can a parent, what can a family do about it? And there are things that can be done to kind of counter that.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's going to be the next question as well. But I think that beforehand, like listening to you guys speak, obviously as a parent, sometimes you just don't have the time and you just do that quick supper, 1, 2, 3, pasta and cheese or whatever it is. And I think also that and it frustrates me sometimes when I go to the shops and, you go shopping and the fruits and the vegetables are so much more expensive than the biscuits and the cake and the fish fingers and potato chips, whatever you call it, crisps, that you just put in the oven and 5 minutes later it's done. And it's frustrating because, even if you go with your heart full in there, I'm going to get the healthy food. It's more expensive. So it's kind of like a battle that's really, really hard to overcome, and when you were speaking before about us with genetics, it just kind of like brought up this feeling with me. Those types of people that are just annoying, that they just eat bars and bars of chocolate and they're just like a stick thin. And then you have those people that just don't even look at chocolate and they put on the weight. So it's just, that could be also very frustrating. But what I hear from you as well is that it's not, obviously that's not just the issue. And obviously people that do have that, that's just life. And as you said, they just have to work a little bit harder. They have to do a bit more exercise. They have to be a bit more careful with their calorie intake. But I think all in all, it's just a frustrating topic, and it's such an important topic, but it's also, it's frustrating, and it can be challenging from lots of different angles, as parents, as kids, busy parents, the fast life that's kind of just going faster and faster, I think. So I guess this literally naturally leads me on to the next question, which is, do you have any tips for parents, whose children obviously suffer from obesity, and things that they can do? Because what we like to do in these webcams is to be able to kind of come out with some tools, with some practical tools of how we can, change and make some changes to our life.
Yeah, so one common teaching tool that I often use in the office, I don't take credit for, has been brainstormed by specialists, and I believe it came out through the CDC, is a mnemonic 5210. So that kind of hits all of the areas that should be focused on. So 5 stands for 5 servings of fresh fruits and vegetables a day. So again, that doesn't mean that you're eating 5 times a day. So a serving nutritionally is a certain amount of food. So presumably if you have fresh fruits or vegetables for 2 of your 3 meals, you should be able to get in 5 servings. 2 stands for no more than 2 hours of screen time. So again, coming back to one of the greatest risk factors for the increase in obesity, at least in the United States, it clearly is overuse of screen time. And again, that's non-educational, volitional, recreational screen time.
Anyone who's interested can go to our last recording, because that's what
exactly
very interesting.
So 1 stands for 1 hour of aerobic physical activity per day, and 0 stands for 0 servings of sugar sweetened beverages per day. So again, are those hard and fast rules? No, they're guidelines. So there needs to be some compromise and some reality in life. So is there a difference between an August day when your child's not in camp and they're hanging out at home versus a school day where they have other activities? Sure, there is. But, if you kind of think of those as guidelines and ratios, that they emphasize the key points, which you need to eat healthy, you need to exercise regularly, and you need to try and limit calories, especially through consumption of sugar sweetened beverages. So those are very simple take homes that parents can try and incorporate. Now, actually doing it, it's different. So there's a huge difference between, what I can say in my office and a family going home and making change occur. And I fully understand the reality of that, having 4 children, but it is an important concept from which families can meet together and kind of come up with new family rules, quote unquote.
Thank you.
Yeah, to expound on what Dr. Tom said, so we use the same, 5210.
That's good to know.
But, yes, great. And so what I like to do in the office, and I think what most pediatricians is to, start discussing with the family. First and foremost, I want to get to know the family culture. And again, going back to their economic status. So, if the family is vegetarian, then we want to create a plan that's realistic to that. If the family, like you said, both parents work and they come home at 6 o'clock, they don't have time, and we know they're going to have takeout, then let's make a plan accordingly. Hey, what should we choose to eat when we're taking out the takeout foods? The other thing is also when we're address it as a family plan rather than the child plan, because we don't want to target the child as though they have to make the changes and they're the only ones. It's like, hey, as a family, let's eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. Let's do 1 hour of physical activity, so that we know that it's a healthy lifestyle that we're shooting for, not a weight loss plan or anything like that.
Exactly.
One of the things that I incorporate, and I always use the saying that it takes 21 days to create a good habit and 21 days to break a bad habit. And so I tell the parents, I'm like, listen, if I tell you eat 5 fruits and vegetables, if I tell you don't eat fast food, don't eat processed food, stop the sodas, it's too overwhelming.
You give
So
up.
So let's let the child, hey, what do you want to change first? Okay, fine. For the next 3 weeks, we don't buy chips in the house. Once you've done that for 3 weeks, okay, 3 weeks later, continue that. But now you've established that. Now, why don't we say we're not going to drink any soda? And so if you give them a step-by-step and let them eliminate or change a habit one at a time, it actually is doable rather than they just quit after it being not manageable at all. So I like to incorporate that into the family. And then also it gives them a goal setting. So, hey, here, now these are our goals. And then when you do achieve these goals, get a positive reward. Let's reward them with an activity or praise. No food, no toys. Those aren't the things we're rewarding them with. So if you, this just keeps their motor running and just, just having something to achieve, it's really helped. And again, like I said, the main thing is I can't just give them this and say, hey, go change this, because it's very
Too
difficult
much.
for them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too big, isn't
Bhumi
it?
alluded to this, which is the importance of it not being just the child alone where change needs to occur. So change needs to occur in the entire family in order for one individual in the family to be able to succeed. And there's pretty good research that validates that kind of common sense thought. So what does that mean? Well, in a family, perhaps everybody is overweight and everybody would benefit from the same thing. But even people who are at what we call a healthy weight should eat healthy foods, and they should exercise, and they should limit their screen time for other reasons of their general physical and mental health outside of just weight management.
Sure.
For many years, I was the medical director of a weight management program, and one of my favorite stories was speaking to one of the children that was in the program was, how are things going for you? And he said, I'm having a really hard time. I'm really committed to doing this, but I'm trying to eat healthy. My dad comes home every night and eats cheeseburgers and French fries in front of me, and I just can't do it.
Mouth.
So, it becomes a conversation that parents need to be role models, but passively, the way to sabotage a child who is well-intentioned is for that child to not have the kind of background support where everybody else is committed. And that means, at some point cleaning out the pantry and just not having the junk food available. And, I've had this conversation many times. Well, Jane is very thin and Joe is very heavy. Jane needs the junk food to gain weight. Like, no. Jane doesn't need the junk to gain weight. Jane
No one needs it.
eat healthy foods, and don't worry, we'll work on that as a separate topic. So, again, it is a family project, and I think that leads to greater success in the long run.
Amazing. I think that you really touched on a point here that I was, as you were speaking, I was thinking, that as parents, we need to lead by example. It's like we spoke on the screens. We spoke about, if a parent, is the first thing the parent looks at when they wake up in the morning is their phone, and not their wife or their husband, their spouse that's next to them, then what do we expect from the kids? And I think it's exactly the same here. If we don't do the exercise, if we don't eat healthy, if we don't get used to cutting ourselves a salad instead of, sticking some fish fingers in the, in the oven, then our kids are just not gonna, not gonna learn from that either. And I think this kind of leads us to kind of like concluding and kind of to my last question that you actually touched upon, which is how should a parent broach the subject of obesity with their child without pushing their child towards eating disorders? And I think you touched on that, very well. That it's not a child's issue. It's not he has to deal with that issue. It's everyone together. Supporting the family in eating healthily. As you said, it's not like I deserve to eat the junk food and he has to eat the carrots. No, the junk food is for no one. As you say, you can have a treat here, you can have a treat there, you can kind of be a bit flexible, as you say, when it's holidays, if it's weekend. But generally, the vibe in the house is eating healthy, is helping each other to realize that those vegetables, that exercise, whatever you can do. And as you said, Dr. Bhumi, not too much, because too much is just overwhelming and they'll give up after a day, 2 days, depends on the person. And then they're never going to try it again. So that's kind of like what I heard from what you were saying about what's the advice, to how to approach the topic with the child without pushing them too far. Before we end, is there anything within that topic that you would like to share with me, with parents, with anyone who is watching this?
So I think in general, like I said, is, one, not to really even talk about weight, not to say anything about overweight or needing to lose weight. I think the biggest approach that parents, physicians, anyone take with a child or even with each other is let's all just have a healthy lifestyle. And then when you take it that as that, then we know we all are going to do it. And we don't want to focus that this healthy lifestyle is going to make us lose weight. No, we want to focus as this, hey, this healthy lifestyle is going to, prevent us from having heart disease, prevent us from having diabetes, prevent us from having increased fractures when we get older. So I think if we all approach it in that sense, no one is being blamed. No parent is being blamed, no child is being blamed, and I think and you work together. And I think that's the biggest thing is when you see other people doing it, you feel like to do it. I mean, we all adults are doing that, right? I go to the gym because my friend goes to the gym and she gives me that motivation. You need that motivation for others.
Yeah, thank you.
Language that we use is very important, and that's both language a parent uses as well as language that a doctor will use in the exam room. So doctors should use very neutral, non-judgmental language around this topic. And yes, there is a concern that when you emphasize weight as the driving outcome, that you can cause teenagers especially to kind of start to have the thinking around what can lead to eating disorders, which can be, as clearly detrimental as to your health, and being overweight can be. And I think the language parents use is, because they're with their child a lot more than we are, is really important, and also needs to be non-judgmental and, non-harassing, in the sense of, if every day a parent says, you can't eat that French fry, that's not going to be a healthy long-term strategy for that child's physical health or mental health. And it's frustrating as a parent because as a parent, you understand that the choices the child is making at the time can have a negative impact on their health, and you want to find a way to make them change in a way that is in their best long-term health interest. But I think from experience, I can say until the child is ready to make change happen, we can support them, we can encourage them, we can give them tools in the toolkit, we can give them resources, but it's important to allow the child to come to the decision that they're ready to make change whenever that is.
Right.
And kids where I've had this conversation for 2, 3, 4 years, nothing changes, and then suddenly something happens, and sometimes it's not even to their level of consciousness that they understand what it is. That they're ready to make change, and things come together quickly. So it's important to coach, to cajole, to encourage, to provide resources, but it's ultimately going to be the child, whatever age that might be, who comes to make change at a time when they're ready for it.
I can't agree more with every word that you guys have said, and I really, really appreciate it because I think it's such a huge topic. not just in America, everywhere. The parents, struggle with, whether it's the parent themselves, whether it's the parent with the child. And I think there's been a lot of input here today, a lot of insights, and a lot of tips to really be able to kind of like move forward in a healthy way, a mentally healthy way, which is as important, a physical way, and really kind of give tools to people, parents, families who struggle with this. And really, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Everyone, it's not like, it's not like they can't do it. You can do it. It's just hard work. But it's worth it. At the end of the day, we all want to be healthy, and we all believe in the importance of it. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to the next one.